Hello everyone, what is up? It is Theme Park Avenger here, and today guys I'm finally back with another video. It's been a good while since I last uploaded a video, or at least one with me speaking. I've been a bit lazy recently, uploading POVs generally. But yeah, I'm finally here actually doing a video. Now, I do have a good reason for why it's taking so long, and that's because I'm finally editing on PC, so expect some much better quality. Just of the overall video. You'll notice some small things. I've added a watermark to my video to make it look a bit more professional as such. But yeah, I've been doing a lot more PC work, so just to know, in the future there will be a lot more videos coming on my PC now that I actually have a good software. Anyway, let's look at the actual video today. I'm going to be looking at my 15 best roller coasters I've ridden. Now, I haven't ridden like an over-the-top amount of coasters. I'm going on for 40 at the minute. I've not yet ridden 40, but the good thing about my list is that most of the rides I have ridden are actually like really good rides. So, you know, it's been quite hard to make this list. I know I did one a few, about a year ago maybe. That was a top 10 list, and my opinions have drastically changed since then. I've also ridden a lot more like coasters. Obviously I went to Thorpe Park maybe nearly a month back, and yeah, that was one of my favourite theme parks I've ever been to. Some of those coasters are hitting up very high in my top 15. So yeah, I think without further ado, we should just get straight to the video. I've been waffling for too long in the first minute. Or I wouldn't say waffling, I was just telling you what's gone on, why I've not been uploading. But yeah, we're going to get straight into the video. Let's go. For the very bottom spot at number 15, I have gone with Crush's Coaster at Disneyland Paris. This coaster is made by Morrison, and it is one of the 2 spinning coasters that I've ridden made by them. The reason I like this coaster so much is because of the really good theming and pretty forceful layout. While I do think Spinball Wizard is more intense, this ride delivers a very fun ride, and for families it is almost definitely ideal. The theming really adds to the ride, and that's why it is the number 15 spot on my list. Just a very enjoyable ride, but it's not too intense to be a major thrill coaster. So for number 14, we have the second of the Morrison spinning coasters, and this is Spinball Wizard at Alton Towers. Now, there are quite a few Alton coasters on the list, and Spinball Wizard is a bit lower down due to it being, well, not the smoothest of rides, should I say. That being said though, the theming is okay. The tower standards is a little bit embarrassing, but you know, it does have some theming which is better than some of the other rides on the list. It also probably has the best soundtrack out of any coaster in the country, which really plays into why I like this ride so much. Now, Crush's Coaster has much better theming than Spinball, so why have I placed it above it? Well, as a coaster, I do prefer Spinball. Crush's may be smoother, but Spinball is much more forceful. As a family coaster, this has to be one of the most intense. The first drop and overbank are very forceful, and even I have to hold on tight sometimes. Now, another reason I like the ride is because it has a unique experience every time. You don't know if it's going to be an intense ride, a smooth ride, a rough ride, or a tame ride. It's so unpredictable, this ride, and I love it so much for that reason. Again though, as I just stated, the ride can be rough sometimes, so that's why it's not any higher, and also because it's a family coaster, it's not going to be the most unique of layouts. However, for a ride experience, it's one that you have to give a go, especially if you do live in the UK, or near Alton Towers. Right, so coming in at the 13th spot on the list, we have the big one, arguably the most iconic coaster in the UK. It is currently my tallest coaster, I believe, but that being said, it's just quite rough, and towards the end it gets really boring. I will give it credit for having possibly the best views on any coaster as of right now, and it does have the second best drop on any coaster. The first drop on this is both forceful and gives great views, so there's something like, I don't know, I just really like the first drop on this ride, but after there, it just kind of goes downhill. The first airtime hill is decent for the views, but as in terms of airtime, I mean, none of these hills really give airtime. It also gets almost unbearably rough midway through the layout, and the retrack has probably made it rougher in my opinion. It's not a smooth ride, and that is why it is at number 13. The first drop and the views though are absolutely magnificent, so I have to give it credit for that. And as it's, you know, it's the UK's iconic coaster, it would be a bit of a sin for me not to include it on the list. But if I'm being honest, it's not a coaster I particularly like, and it's not a coaster I particularly hate. It's just okay. So yeah, big one, it's iconic, but it is a little bit overrated, especially by the GP. It's not very smooth, and it's not aged the best. But yeah, let's go on to the next ride. Wickerman is coming in at the number 12 spot on the list, just generally for being quite a crazy ride. It is a family coaster, so it's not the most thrilling ride going, but this for me was a great surprise, especially at night. This ride runs so different at night compared to the day, and to be fair, I would barely class it as a family coaster at night. The reason I like this ride so much is because of the theming. This definitely is the best themed coaster I've ridden and the best themed coaster, you know, in the UK. It's made by GCI, so expect some pretty intense turns and some good airtime. With it being a family coaster though, it is a bit more laid back on airtime compared to some of the US models. So, you know, it's not going to be the best wooden coaster in the world. However, the theming really adds to this ride, and in my opinion is the main, you know, reason I like the coaster so much. That being said though, the layout's decent, it does have its intense moments. At night you'll get it running really fast and get some really strong ejector airtime. But, you know, as a whole coaster, it isn't the best. It's number 12 for that reason, but it is good, to be fair. It does get long queues, so I'd definitely go here first. But yeah, it's a great coaster, very enjoyable, and definitely a must ride if you are at Alton Towers. So for number 11 on the list, I've gone with Colossus. Colossus is located at Thorpe Park and it's manufactured by Intamin. Personally, this is my least favourite of the big 5 coasters at Thorpe Park, despite it having the most inversions. If you don't know, I'm big on inversions, but this ride kinda didn't do it for me. That being said, it does have its great elements. The first vertical loop is very forceful, and that ejector airtime hill has possibly some of the best ejector airtime at Park. I would say Stealth and Soar's airtime moments are slightly better than Colossus's, but aside from that, you know, it's a good airtime moment. The only bit of the ride I don't like is the Cobra Roll, because it has got quite a bit of a jolt and it's not the smoothest of elements. Aside from the Cobra Roll though, the corkscrews give a great adrenaline rush, and that quadruple barrel roll is just iconic. The quadruple barrel roll in my opinion was the most memorable part of the ride, and also the funnest part of the ride due to giving great hang time. It gives a head shopper in some elements, and also it's quite intense. I found this to be, you know, reasonably forceful, so for that reason, Colossus is at number 11. It's not my favourite coaster in the world, but it's memorable mainly for the quadruple barrel roll and the ejector airtime moments. Both of them are really good. But yeah, that's number 11, Colossus. Let's move on to number 10. For the number 10 spot on the list, I've gone with Stampeder at Portaventura. Particularly the red side, as I just found the blue side to be a bit too rough for my liking. The red side isn't the smoothest coaster, but for one thing, you know, it's the best wooden coaster I've ridden personally. Towards the back, this thing gives some of the most insane airtime I've ever experienced, and honestly, I think this coaster is very, very underrated. It deserves much more talk for being one of the longest coasters I've ridden. The tunnels are great, the racing elements are great, and the first drop is surprisingly forceful. The coaster as a whole is great and delivers some good laterals, whilst giving some of the strongest airtime I've ever experienced. Stampede at Portaventura is number 10. So yes, number 9 is Oblivion at Alton Towers. Now, keeping it brief with Oblivion because it is very short, the experience is what makes the ride. The queue line with all its screens, the station, the whole atmosphere for the ride really sets the tone. You then go up that like really intimidating lift hill, and then you're held at possibly the scariest drop. You know, just looking at it, it's pretty terrifying. But on ride, it's great fun. It is the best drop I've ever experienced on a coaster. It's forceful. With the mist, it just adds an extra layer. And the theming around the ride, as well as the soundtrack you're hearing now, all kind of add to the ride. It's great fun. It is very short, but that doesn't really take away from the ride in my opinion. I just really like Oblivion for that one drop. But the theming, the queue, the screens, everything like that, it makes the ride 10 times better. Right, so for number 8 on the list, we have Nemesis Inferno. Nemesis Inferno is a B&M invert, same model as Nemesis at Alton Towers, and as you can see, I do clearly prefer Nemesis to Inferno. I have my fair few problems with Inferno, the main one obviously being it caches off Nemesis's name, which in my opinion is a far better coaster. That being said though, I really enjoy Nemesis Inferno, and in fact it surprised me a lot. It was much better than I originally anticipated. I thought it'd be just like a decent coaster, but no, this thing is really intense. In fact, I'd probably say it is more intense than Nemesis, and I'd also say it is smoother than Nemesis. Row 6, left wing, is bloody intense, and I really enjoy that for that reason. In terms of theming, it's not as well themed as Nemesis, but you know, as a ride, I'm going to try and avoid comparing it to Nemesis and just rate it as the ride it is, and that is a surprisingly forceful, coaster with a great layout. I think this ride has a really strong layout. The interlocking corkscrews are by far the most intense bit. I was actually seeing stars in those bits. They are really, really intense, especially on a hot day. In terms of if the ride is rough, no, the ride is not rough. It is very smooth, even on the second to back row. This ride was butter smooth. It flies through the inversions. It's just so whippy and so intense, and that's why I like it. The soundtrack on the ride is also good. It's not my favourite soundtrack, but it is memorable. But yeah, number 8, Nemesis Inferno at Thorpe Park. Let's move on to number 7. So, for the number 7 spot on the list, I've gone with the B&M Wing Coaster, the Swarm. The Swarm is located at Thorpe Park, and it's located in the Swarm Island area of the park. And you know, this ride is actually like really good. As a coaster, I'd probably rate it highly, but the theming again adds another layer to this ride. This ride though is not only made up by the theming, but the head shoppers with the theming. Like the first drop in its own is pretty forceful and gives the best views in the entire park. But then you also go right under this plain wing, which makes you put your hands down straight away. Like, that's mad. Then you go straight into a 0G roll into a billboard, and while it's not exactly an intense element, it does feel really, really relaxing, and then you just get that near miss. After the billboard though, the ride gets quite intense. That turn over the water you're seeing now is very forceful, and I grade out on it. There's a few other near misses towards the end of the ride, and while the restraints aren't my favourites, it is a very smooth coaster for that. So yeah, number 7 is Swarm. So, the number 6 spot on the list goes to Dragon Khan. This is one of my favourite B&Ms. And just quickly, no, I haven't ridden Shambhala yet. It's why it isn't number 1 or number 2 on the list. However, Dragon Khan really surprised me, if I'm being honest. I was expecting it to be, you know, a reasonably forceful, quite a rough ride, which wasn't too intense. But boy oh boy was I surprised, as this in my opinion is one of the smoothest major coasters I've ever ridden. There is not one rough element on this. Even the Inelmin is smooth, and I'm not saying, oh no, it's kind of average. I mean that is butter smooth, that Inelmin. Every element is smooth. Now the first drop is a bit underwhelming, and going down it, I imagine users will probably be like, what is this ride going to be, forceless? But the first vertical loop just caught me off guard with how intense it was. My first ever vertical loop that was, and boy was it intense. Then into the Inelmin, which is okay, it's quite forceful but not as good as the other elements. The 0G wall has a lot of whip to it, and with that, you know, it's an intense element. But yeah, the Cobra roll is the most intense element. On a hot day, you could probably grey out on this. I didn't grey out, but Jesus, it caught me off guard. It's just so forceful. As for the corkscrews, they're okay. They're not really that intense, but towards the back, they are very whippy, so that's kind of fun. But yeah, sadly there isn't any airtime or really any theming on the ride, but I think the inversions and the intensity really make up for the lack of theming. And obviously, you know, it does have that copyright soundtrack, which I'm not playing because I don't want to get a copyright claim. But yeah, Dragon Khan, in my opinion, is an absolutely outstanding coaster, and it is 100% worth a ride if you are down at Portaventura. So, we're starting off the top 5 here with Soar the Ride at Thorpe Park. Soar the Ride is made by Gerstlauer. It's the only Eurofight I've done so far, though I have done an Infinity coaster by them as well. And if I'm being honest, Soar is probably one of the more intense coasters I've ridden. The first outdoor drop really is forceful, and while it's not on the same level as something like Oblivion's drop, it definitely packs a punch with it being 100 degrees. At the time, this was the steepest roller coaster in the world. As well as that though, the theming is so good on this ride. This is possibly my favourite themed coaster I've ever ridden. I mean, obviously it's themed to the Saw franchise, but I think it really executes it well, and it does do these films justice. Now, in terms of the coaster, my favourite element is the indoor bit, because personally I find that to be the most intense. You also get great hang time in the first inversion, and you know, near misses with the spikes and everything. You get all the smoke effects. It's amazing. But in terms of the outdoor element, the first drop is pretty forceful, so the first inversion. The airtime hill is the best airtime in park in my opinion. It's very strong. And then there's a few other turns. There's another inversion. They're okay. I do find them all to be smooth. This is probably one of the smoother coasters at park. I know people are going on about it being rough, but it's really smooth. So yeah, number 5 is Soar, a very underrated coaster in my opinion, and definitely worth a go if you're at Thorpe Park. Okay, so for number 4, I do quite a controversial one. I have Icon at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. Now I know most people say this is the best coaster in the UK, excluding Nemesis, but personally for me, I did find this to be a little bit overhyped. That being said, this coaster on the back row is absolutely amazing. This is the best airtime I've ever experienced in a coaster, and whilst I do think it is slightly overrated, the coaster is still literally god tier. In fact, I know I say it's overrated, but I do love this coaster so much. I feel so bad saying that. It has the best airtime in the UK, without question. And the funny thing is though, because I was there with my mate, shout out to Theme Park Global if you are watching this, who we did meet up with, he said it wasn't even running that well on that day when I got my back row, so hopefully when I do re-ride it in the future it'll go up again, because I rode it on a day when it wasn't running the best. But even then, it has some insane ejector, good floater, it has great hang time. Theming, well, yeah, it's not very existent, it's Blackpool Pleasure Beach, but yeah, this is the best coaster there. It's whippy, it's not very forceful, but it's just the air time, and the soundtrack is also really good. I do just love Icon. It's just, I don't know, it's slightly overhyped, yet it is still one of the best coasters I've ever ridden, if that makes sense. It's amazing. I really like the train design for some reason, that's really cool. The colour scheme is great, it goes right into the park great, you know, it's not intense, although actually the first launch in the back does have some force to it. Icon is just a masterpiece really, there's nothing more you can say. It's got airtime, it has speed, it doesn't have the force, but you know what, it doesn't need it. It is just an amazing coaster nevertheless. So number 4 on the list, Icon at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. Let's move on to number 3. For the number 3 spot, I thought really it was quite an easy choice, and this goes to Stealth at Thorpe Park. Stealth is one of the shortest coasters I've ridden, but easily one of the most memorable. It is the most intense coaster in the UK. Well, I mean, that launch is so forceful, it's not even possible to describe the force you get on that launch. As well as that, the rest of the coaster is also really good. While the launch is the highlight, the theming and the soundtrack is, you know, god tier. The top part's still pretty good, launching you up to 205 feet, making it the second tallest ride in the UK. As well as that, some really strong airtime in the final hurl delivers a really good ride overall, and while it is short, it does pack a great punch. Right, so guys, yeah, number 2 on the list is the Smiler at Alton Towers. Now the Smiler is no longer my number 1 coaster, it's gone down a bit due to its pretty poor performance this year. I've ridden it twice this year and it really wasn't as good as it was last year. That being said, the coaster is still absolutely outstanding. The second airtime hill actually has gotten better this year, and that's my main reason I still like this ride. The second airtime hill is the most god tier element on any coaster. It is probably better than Oblivion's Drop, to be fair. It is mental. As well as that, all the inversions, whilst not as intense as last year, you know, most of them are still pretty intense. The Sea Serpent roll obviously is always running intense, and this year it did not disappoint. The indoor section I found this year was actually like more intense than usual, and I really enjoyed that. It did surprise me how intense that indoor element was, honestly. As for the first airtime hill, it's okay, it's not amazing. The back wing's a good element, you know. I think every version is good, really, except the last 3. The last 3 versions, you know, they are rough. Theming, you know, love the Marmalizer. Soundtrack, I do like parts of this soundtrack. It is jacked up and weird, but I can find myself enjoying this soundtrack on occasion. But yeah, as a whole though, yeah, Smiler is an amazing ride. It has gotten a bit rougher, but that's only really towards the end, the last 3 versions. Theming's great, soundtrack's great, everything matches the ride. It is almost it is not an imperfect, it is almost a perfect coaster if those last 3 versions weren't as rough, and if they weren't, you know, this probably would be number 1. 2 lift hills is insane. I just love this coaster, and it is probably more special to me than number 1 if I'm being honest. But yeah, number 2 is the Smiler at Alton Towers. Let's move to number 1, my new favourite coaster of all time. So that's right, ladies and gentlemen, the ride I always used to say is overrated and rubbish, somehow has become my number 1 coaster. Last year I rode it for the first time in the front row, and I'd have to say it is the worst ride I've ever had in it, because, well, I didn't have a great ride in it. This year though, I've ridden it 3 times, once in the front, once in row 3, and once in row 6, on the left wing, and Jesus Christ, was I wrong about this ride? I think the front row doesn't do it justice for how insane a coaster this can be, because if you're riding on the back, you are probably going to get the, well, yeah, the most intense experience at Alton Towers at least. The theming on this ride is really good, and the soundtrack's decent. I prefer Smiley's theme if I'm being honest. I'm not a huge fan of Nemesis' theme, but it's okay, it matches the ride. But yeah, very forceful. The last corkscrew is a bit rough, but the rest of the ride is just so smooth. It is a masterpiece in its own way, and I don't really have to say any more, because Nemesis is just a god roller coaster. That is that. Nemesis is my #1 coaster. Let's end the video right here with that in mind. Nemesis at Alton Towers is my #1 coaster as of September 2020.